Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Narayan Rao Kovur. Today in this video, we are going to understand the Keynesian theory of determination of national income. So in this chapter, now we will discuss basic concepts and functions of Keynesian theory in a two-sector model. The basic concepts of Keynesian theory in two-sector models are: one is aggregate demand, second one is aggregate supply, third one is components of aggregate demand and components of aggregate supply, fourth one is income saving function or income consumption function or income saving function. So now let us examine first the basic concepts of Keynesian theory. First one is aggregate demand. Aggregate demand means total demand. Here aggregate demand means sum of consumption expenditure plus investment expenditure. That means AD is equal to C plus I. So here aggregate demand in two sector model, aggregate demand for final goods is the sum of ex ante aggregate demand for consumer goods and ex ante aggregate demand for investment goods. That means in a two sector model, aggregate demand is the aggregate demand for final goods is the sum of ex ante aggregate demand for final consumption goods and ex ante aggregate demand for investment goods. Therefore, aggregate demand is equal to C plus I. Aggregate demand is equal to C plus I. AD means aggregate demand, C means consumption expenditure, I means investment expenditure. Therefore, AD is equal to C plus I. Here, C indicates consumption expenditure. So, consumption expenditure accounts for the highest proportion of the GDP. Consumption expenditure accounts for the highest proportion of the gross domestic product. In a simple economy, I is assumed to be determined independently or exogenously. In a simple economy, I is assumed to be determined exogenously or independently and constant in the short run. So I means investment that is constant in the short run. This is called aggregate demand. Therefore, aggregate demand is equal to C plus I. Second one is aggregate supply. Second one is aggregate supply. Aggregate supply means total supply. So here AS is equal to C plus S. AS means aggregate supply, C means consumption, S means savings. So sum of consumption and savings is equal to aggregate supply. Here, total supply of goods and services, the firms in an economy plan to sell during a specific time period. During a specific time period. So aggregate supply means total supply of goods and services the firms in an economy plan to sell during a specific time period. This is called aggregate supply. It is the expected value by the firms. Aggregate supply means expected value by the firms or producers plan to produce goods and services. producers plan to produce goods and services is called aggregate supply, or expected value by the firms is also called aggregate supply. So, aggregate supply is equal to the national income of the economy. Aggregate supply is equal to the national income of the economy. National income of the economy means national income is the total market value of all final goods and services produced in a country during a given period of time is called national income. So aggregate supply is equal to the national income of the economy, which is either consumed or saved, which is either consumed or saved. Therefore, AS is equal to C plus S. AS means aggregate supply is equal to C means consumption or S means savings, which means either consumed or saved. This is called aggregate supply. So AS is equal to C plus S. So here, so it can be explained in a diagrammatic representation. So first, so draw L shape, mark YOX. Aggregate supply is measured in Y-axis, and GDP or national income is measured in X-axis. This is called aggregate supply curve. Aggregate supply curve slopes upwards from left to right is a 45-degree straight line. 45-degree straight line. So, if you observe this diagram, so this is called aggregate supply curve. So, 45-degree straight line. So, that means here in macroeconomics, we assume that the price level is fixed. The first stage in macroeconomics, first stage, we assumed that the price level is fixed. Next, there are many unused resources in the economy. There are many unused resources in the economy, unemployed workers and not used machines, etc. Next, and so the economy can increase or decrease the production easily. When there is a unused resources in the economy, as a result of that, the economy can increase or decrease production easily. Next, therefore, whatever level of GDP is produced will also be supplied. Whatever the level of GDP is produced will be supplied. Next, this is shown by a 45-degree straight line called the aggregate supply curve. Aggregate supply curve, that is GDP is equal to aggregate supply. Gross domestic product is equal to aggregate supply. So here, this is for aggregate supply curve. What is the shape of the aggregate supply curve? Aggregate supply curve slopes upwards from left to right and starting from origin point, and it is like a 45-degree straight line. 45-degree straight line. Next. Therefore, gross domestic product is equal to aggregate supply. That aggregate supply is equal to C plus S. Aggregate supply is equal to C plus S. C means consumption, S means savings. Right. Third point is components of aggregate demand. Components of aggregate demand. AD means aggregate demand. First component of the aggregate demand is consumption function. consumption function. The consumption function shows the relationship between aggregate consumption expenditure, that is treated as C, and aggregate disposable income, that is treated as Y. Consumption function shows that the relationship between aggregate consumption expenditure and aggregate disposable income. That means C is equal to F of Y. C is equal to F of Y. C means consumption, F means a functional relationship, Y means income, simply aggregate disposable income. It can be write as C is equal to A plus BY. C is equal to A plus BY. C is equal to consumption. A is equal to autonomous consumption. Autonomous consumption. That is, if income is zero, there is a consumption. That is called autonomous consumption. It is the minimum consumption when income is zero. If your income is zero, there is a consumption, that is called autonomous consumption. A is treated as autonomous consumption. And B is called slope of consumption. B is slope of consumption, that is called MPC, marginal propensity consume. Marginal propensity to consume. That MPC, B is treated as MPC or MPC is treated as B, that is slope of consumption function. So that means MPC is equal to delta C by delta Y. Change in the consumption divided by change in the income. This is called MPC, marginal propensity to consume. So, in the components of aggregate demand, the first one is a consumption function. Consumption function shows that the relationship between consumption and income. C is equal to F of Y. In other words, C is equal to A plus BY. What is the meaning of A? A means autonomous consumption. What is autonomous consumption? Your income is zero, there is a consumption. It is the minimum consumption when income is zero. Next, B, slope of consumption function, that is called MPC. MPC is equal to delta C by delta Y. This can be explained with the help of diagram. Consumption function can be explained with the help of diagram. First, draw L shape, mark YOX. Consumption is measured on y-axis and income is measured on x-axis. So, this is called C is equal to F of Y. C is equal to F of Y. So, if you observe this gap A, this is called consumption, autonomous consumption. If your income is zero, but there is a consumption, this A is called autonomous consumption. To maintain the level of living, we have to incur some amount, that is called autonomous consumption, to satisfy the basic needs. To satisfy the basic needs, we have to consume even though there is no income. That is called autonomous consumption. This gap is called autonomous consumption, and this is called consumption function line. C is equal to F of Y. This is called B, slope. So B is the slope of the consumption function. That B is equal to MPC. That MPC is equal to delta C by delta Y. So we conclude that consumption is a function of income. Consumption depends upon income. Consumption depends upon income. This is called consumption function.